Hi, this is Simcha Gluck, and I wanted to share some, I hope, thought-provoking and riveting insights about the week's Torah portions regarding Yosef and the king of Mitzrayim and the twin Moshiachs, the redemption from Egypt to Israel, and God willing, the redemption that we're going to experience in our times really, really soon. And to put it all together, I wanted to just tie in a lot of insights that I've gotten from my time spent learning with Charlie Harari, my time spent with Reb Mendel Kessin, Reb Shimon Kessin, that both really get into the works of the Ramchal, Reb Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, and the deep understandings of a lot of the codes in the Torah from that perspective and framework. And then also bringing in some Rabbi Joel David Baxt as well, who gets into the secret doctrine of the Vilna Gaon and the pineal gland and the Torah. And a lot of the gematrias that Hashem sent to me personally as downloads that can really weave, I hope, a lot of these ideas together. So, many of us have this idea of Mashiach now. We want Mashiach now, right? Mashiach now. We want the Geula, right? So it's great. It's awesome. If we wanted to put into words Mashiach, is there a Mashiach? And the answer is there's certainly a Mashiach. To get a little deeper, there's actually twin Mashiachs. There's two Mashiachs as brought down in many different places in the Kabbalah and the Zohar. Right? There's Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. And it's important to know that because those two Mashiachs are everything for us. It's like the double helix of our DNA. And why is there a need for this double Mashiach? Well, let's go back to the origin story. Let's take a moment to go back to the Garden of Eden. Hashem created on the sixth day Adam and then Chava. And the goal of Adam was to just keep one mitzvah. And through his keeping one mitzvah, Adam would retransform the world back into the complete infinite oneness of Hashem. And unfortunately, what happened is that didn't happen. Unfortunately, Adam listened to the Nachash, and he ate from the Eitz Hadat, and then he descended into lower dimensional reality. And that was a really big deal. Interesting to note that Adam was the first Mashiach, and the same gematria of Mashiach is Nachash, 358. Nachash, Mashiach, same exact forces. So, unfortunately, Adam, who was the Mashiach, listened to that energy coming from the Klippa, from the Sitra Achra, from the Nachash. And all of a sudden, they were thrown out of the Garden of Eden into lower dimensional reality. And now, here we are as people raising our families in this lower dimensional reality, working to gather up the sparks, as they say, and to retransform back to the Garden of Eden. That's the necessity of Mashiach ben Yosef. He's going to bring us back to the Garden of Eden. And once we're back in the Garden of Eden, Mashiach ben David from Shevet Yehudah, that's going to retransform us back to the oneness of Hashem. And that's the whole idea of the double Mashiach, of the twin Mashiachs, and why we specifically right now need something that Adam didn't need. Adam was the Mashiach of just the world in the Garden of Eden. Now we have two tikkunim. We have to bring the world back to the Garden of Eden. And the second thing is that then we transform back to Hashem. It's important to talk about this because there's an incredible dynamic that takes place in these week's Torah portions regarding the maturity of Yosef. Yosef really taking his post as the king of Mitzrayim. And then, of course, parshat Vayigash coming up, where we see the interfacing of these two Moshiachs, Yehuda and Yosef, speaking to each other. And before we get to some of their conversations and some of the codes and some of the secrets that are hidden in plain sight, let's just dive into the redemption process for a quick moment. It says that in our days that the revelation, the redemption that we're going to have happen is going to be even more transformational than the redemption that happened from Yetziat Mitzrayim to the land of Israel. Mitzrayim is Metzarim, from the constraints, and Israel is the land of Harchava, Eretz Harchava, the land of expansion, expanded possibilities, expanded mindset. Now, what's amazing, when we look in the Chumash and we look at the redemption process, and we see it through Moshe, right? Because Moshe was the leader. Moshe was a Mashiach of his generation. The question is very simple. Well, if Moshe was the Mashiach of his generation, what gave him the right to be the Mashiach? How did he have it? Moshe was a child of Levi. Levi's awesome. He's certainly holy, right? He works with the Kohanim. They do amazing stuff in the temple. Levi is amazing, right? Shimon and Levi work together. Boy, what they were able to do together, unbelievable. But Moshe was the son of Levi, and Levi's not a Mashiach. So how was Moshe able to be the Mashiach of the great Geula process of the redemption from Egypt? And if we look in the Torah, we find something really, really fascinating. It's actually written beferush. It says very explicitly. It says that after all 10 makot took place, it says that the children of Israel, the Bnei Israel, left chamushim when they went up from the land of Egypt. It says that the Bnei Israel left armed when they went up from Egypt. Armed? Wow, okay. That's amazing. What were they armed with? Well, we all know the famous mefarshim that talk about the fact that chamushim, in addition to being armed, is also chamushim, a fifth. What does it mean, a fifth? That many famous commentators talk about the fact that really only a fifth of the Jewish people, only 20% of the collective Jewish population were fitting to be redeemed. The other 80% died in the Makkah of Choshech. They just didn't get it. They were too embedded into the idolatrous pagan notions of Egypt and everything that it was about. And they just couldn't get it together. Makkah by Makkah came as a recruiting process. Rev Kessens talk about this. And more Jews saw and were on board, but they were still too entrenched that even after the 10th Makkah came, still 80% perished, and only chamushim. They left a fifth. And many people say that it's going to be very similar in today's day and age also, that 80% aren't going to make it to the times of redemption. Only a fifth are. I certainly hope that that's not true, but we're just talking about what they talk about. But leaving that understanding aside of the 1/5, the 20, the 80%, let's look at really, why does the Torah mention that they left armed? What do they have, bow and arrows on them? Swords? Machine guns? No, of course not, right? So what did they leave armed with? And you know what the Torah tells us in the next pasuk after this? What did they leave armed with? Very simple. Very simple. They left armed with the atzmut Yosef, They left with the bones of Yosef. And of course, there are many that talk about that it wasn't just the bones of Yosef. It was the atzmot, it was the essence of Yosef. That basically Moshe left carrying the Mashiach technology. The Mashiach technology was the bones of Yosef. And Moshe was able to be the redeemer of Yisrael, the Mashiach of the people, because in that moment he was carrying Mashiach technology, which allowed him to step into the Mashiach vehicle and play that role. It's the Mashiach ben Yosef spiritual technology to bring redemption for the Jewish people. You know, we talk about wearable technologies, right? So just imagine coming into the land of Israel after receiving the Torah was to turn the land of Israel back to the Garden of Eden, and then to hopefully have Mashiach ben David waiting to escort Moshe and the new Israelite people back home for the retransformation. And, we know this idea, right, in the sense that, all these different fractals and elements of Torah repeat back, right, like the whole idea of the oneness of Hashem. Then it breaks down into the Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 principal commandments, the 1-0, which equal the oneness of Hashem. And then those 10 breaking down to the 613 mitzvot. And of course, 6 plus 1 plus 3 equals 10. And the 10 is the 1 plus 0 is back to the 1. So all these ideas that really can reflect back about that. But this whole idea that Moshe, what were they armed with? They were armed with the Mashiach technology. They were armed with the Atzmot Yosef, the essence of Yosef. And that's what allowed everything to take place. That's what activated all sorts of incredible things with the pillar of fire and the smoke and the Shekhinah and all the miracles that took place that protected them along the way. And going back to Moshe carrying Yosef's bones, how can we know that is Mashiach related? And the answer is because it's hidden in plain sight. So I want to just take us to a pasuk. It says, Ki heshpeya hishpiya et bnei Yisrael lemor, pakod yifkod Elokim etchem. So Moshe says literally, a double lashon, Ki heshpeya hishpiya, I swore, right? And whenever we see a double lashon, it's a good remez of the doubles of the twin Moshiachs. And he swore pakod yifkod, another double language, the double language of redemption. The code of pakod yifkod is the redemptive code, a double language, which represents the twin Moshiachs. Pakod yifkod is the Messiah code. It's a redemption password being typed into the essence of Yosef and causing it to regenerate itself into Moshe. The double language is because of the twin Moshiachs. And again, first we bring the first Mashiach, Yosef, to bring collective humanity back up into Adam in the Garden of Eden, and the second Mashiach of David to retransform ourselves back into the infinite revealed light of Hashem himself. The code is spelled out for us in this double promise of Hashpeah Hishpia and the double redemption of Pakod Yifkod. And I want to bring this up because it's so interesting. When I was rummaging through Sephariah, however you want to pronounce it, there's only 3 times in the entire Torah that Pakod Yifkod are used. 3 times. And I want to just share those 3 times right now as we're gearing up to actually see this encounter that takes place between Yosef and between Yehuda. So the first time it says, Vayomer Yosef el achav, Anochi met, ve'Elohim pakod yifkod etchem, ve'he'ele etchem min ha'aretz hazot, el ha'aretz asher nishba la'Avram, li'Yitzchak u'li'Yakov. So Yosef says to his brothers, look, I'm about to die. Hashem will surely take notice of you. That's how it translates pakod yifkod, which I don't love, but that's okay. And he'll bring you up from this land to the land that he promised, an oath to Avram, to Yitzchak, and to Yaakov. This pasuk, he swears to his brothers. And the next one to the Bnei Yisrael, this generation, and all the future ones going forward, on the archetypal level. And of course, all the fractals of the future generations too. The second time it says pakod yifkod, it says like this: Vayishba Yosef et Bnei Yisrael lemor. Pakod yifkod Elohim etchem v'halitem et atzmotai mizeh. So Yosef made the sons of Israel swear, saying, when Hashem has taken notice of you, pakod yifkod, you shall carry up my bones from here. Okay? So now we have pakod yifkod and the atzmot of Yosef. And the third time it says, Vayikach Moshe atzmot Yosef imo, ki heshpeah hishpia et bnei Yisrael lemor, pakod yifkod Elohim etchem v'halitem et atzmotai mizeh etchem. Moshe took with him the bones of Yosef, who had exacted an oath from the children of Israel, saying, God will be sure to take notice of you. Then you shall carry up my bones from here with you. It's important to mention every single time we see this this pakod yifkod, this double code of the twin Moshiachs, and very often we see it in relation with the heshpeah. It's a swear, a double swear. And what's really amazing is that pakod yifkod is gematria of 378, and heshpeah, swear, is gematria of 377. Same double word used by Moshe, used by Yosef. Really interesting. And I think even more fascinating is the fact that pakod yifkod is the same gematria, 378, as the word chashmal, electricity, divine electricity. Chashmal, as many people say, which stands for chachma shel ma'aleh. Chachma shel ma'aleh. It's the really high level technology. This is the electricity being used to charge the Yosef Mashiach technology in the atzmot that Moshe is carrying. Moshe was basically powering up this wearable technology and stepping into this high level persona to take Bnei Yisrael to what's being asked of them, what's going to come next. Moshe truly was epically close to being a real actualized Mashiach just from having the atzmot Yosef being chamush, armed with it. In Hebrew, Moshe Chai, Moshe is alive, is the same gematria as HaMashiach. Interesting. We know from Musaf that we read on Shabbat Kodesh, it says, Yismach Moshe b'matnat chelko, ke'eved na'aman ve'eved na'aman. Yismach Moshe. Moshe will be happy. Yismach Moshe, Yismach is the same gematria as Mashiach. Yismach is Mashiach. It's the same letters. So we understand the power of Moshe as the Mashiach because he was holding the Yosef technology. We understand that. We understand that. And now it just comes down to let's understand who he was, who these twin Moshiachs, Yosef and Yehuda, were. We go back to understanding the fact that Yosef was someone who he started off as an immature child, a child of Rachel, who was Yaakov's obviously first choice as a wife. Unfortunately, it didn't work out like that, or fortunately it didn't work out for that, however you want to say. But he was Yaakov's favorite child. Makes sense, his Bechor from Rachel. And it's really amazing because Yosef gets sold into slavery. He gets sold. And we watch him rise. We watch him become the leader of the house of Potiphar. And then we watch him rise again and become the leader of the entire prison system of Egypt, which you can imagine was immense. And we watch him rise to being the ultimate king of Mitzrayim, which essentially is the king of the world. Because when the famine hit, people not only did they use all their money from all over the world to buy shevel, to buy supplies from the land of Egypt, but then they sold their lands and eventually themselves into slavery. Before Yosef said, don't sell yourselves into slavery, I'm going to give you seed so you can go back and plant whatever you plant. Please just send 20% back to us. You keep 80%. Another of the 80-20, right, that we talked about with the chamushim, and now we talk about another 80-20 as a really great method in business too, potentially, regarding what Yosef set up with people all over the world. Instead of being broken serfs and vassals, having no dignity or self-esteem, Yosef gives them seeds and says, go back and plant. Go back and plant. Take this from the storehouse that I've been keeping in Mitzrayim for all these years of good and plenty and well. And go back and plant and keep 80%, just send 20% back to us. It's really amazing. And I remember thinking to myself, we're watching this whole thing unload with Yosef and his personality and his greatness, and we get really into the making of Yosef and who he is and who he becomes. And all of a sudden, the brothers come down to Mitzrayim, and Yosef sees them, and it brings him back. It brings him back. I remember being at a shiur where Charlie Harari said something really, really beautiful. I don't remember where he got this from, but he said, a lot of people don't really understand why didn't Yosef communicate with his father way earlier? Why did it take this whole episode to take place? And what specifically happens in the conversation back and forth with Yehuda and the brothers and all these different things that finally actually causes Yosef to break down and say, wow, I need to reveal myself right now. What is it? What changes? And he explains something really, really amazing. He explains that we see the animosity between the brothers and Yosef. We see that they don't like him. They resent him. They resent him for his dreams. They resent him from jealousy. They resent him from the ketonet pasim, from the coat of many colors. They have this hatred towards him, it says. And what happens is right after Yosef shares his double dream, right after, Yaakov says to Yosef, like the very next day, hey, your brothers went to go shepherding in Shechem. Can you just go chase after them and go tell me how they're doing? And it's one of the most curious things on the planet. Why would Yaakov send this little boy to Shechem, right? Especially last time they were in Shechem, Shimon and Levi decimated Shechem and destroyed it. And Yaakov was really ticked that was their action. And Yaakov said, oh my gosh, what are we going to do now? And Shimon and Levi said, well, excuse me, but what do you expect? They can't just destroy the dignity of our sister Dinah. That's it. And then we don't hear from Shechem again until all of a sudden Yaakov, after the dreams, Yaakov says to Yosef, hey, you know what? Go back to Shechem. It's safe. Go report on how your brothers are doing. And Yosef says, okay, hineni, right? All right, kibbud av v'em, sounds good to me. And he goes on this journey, and that's when he encounters an ish, a person in the forest that says, they actually went on a 3-day journey to Dotan. All of a sudden Yosef's like, oh my gosh, this is getting really intense. Now I got to go on a 3-day journey to Dotan to report on my brothers back to my father about how they're doing. All right, I guess so. He goes on this 3-day journey, and then all of a sudden they see him coming, they throw him into a pit, and next thing you know, he is sold into slavery. He is sold down to Egypt. So what does Yaakov say to himself? My father was in on the ambush. My dad was in on the ambush. Why else would he not communicate to Yaakov, his father that he loved this entire time? Because right after Yosef shares the dreams, and Yaakov listens to the dreams, and Yaakov says, I don't know about this stuff. He says that he kept it in mind, but he even says, Ma chalom asher chalamta. What is the dream you dreamt? Again, this double lashon, this like double lashon of Moshiach stuff, right? And I remember hearing as a kid something really interesting, just talking about hachalom asher chalamta. Why this additional language needed? Just tell us your dream. Asher chalamta, because asher chalamta, aleph shin, and then Rachel meta. Rachel died. Your dream can't be possibly true because Rachel's dead. And he had this vision of the different luminaries around, with the stars, and it didn't really make sense. So right after Yaakov says this to him, okay, he kept it in mind, but Yaakov hears the dream, he sends him on this journey, next thing he knows, he finds himself in Mitzrayim. Wow, my father and my brothers just ambushed me. I can't believe that. And how distraught he was. Are my dreams sheker? Are they bad? Am I a bad person? Did I do something? Why would my father just send me away like that and team up with my brothers to go ahead and do this? So of course he didn't go ahead and reach out to his father. Matter of fact, both names of his children, Ephraim and Menashe, are names of the pain of leaving his father's house. So what happens finally? What happens finally in this coming week's parsha? And we'll get to the end, but then we'll go back because there's so much to unpack over here. Is in Vayigash, Yehuda steps forward. Kadma va'azla revi'i. The fourth son steps up, and gets right in the face of Yosef, and they hammer it out. There's an interfacing of these twin Moshiachs. And Yehuda explains, look, you can't do this. You can't have Binyamin. I don't care that you found your gavia in the sack. I don't care about it. I promised my father, I swore achrayut, I swore responsibility. And he says something that he hasn't said up until now, which is he said, my father, is going to think, just like he did with, he thinks with the first one. Hold on for 1 second. Let's actually read it live over here. Then your servant, my father, said to us, you know that my wife bore me 2 sons. One has left me, and I presume, alas, he has surely been torn to pieces, for I have not seen him since. Again, a double language, a twin Mashiach language over here too. Yosef hears for the first time, my father thinks I was torn to bits? What? I thought that my father was in on the ambush. You mean he wasn't? You mean I have a father? My father is alive? And that's when he couldn't restrain himself anymore. And he closes the curtains. He kicks out all the Egyptians from the room. It's just him and his brother. Ani Yosef ha'od avichai. Is my father really alive? I still have a father. There's a father alive to me, not just alive in the world. I've already mourned the death of my relationship with him. There's a real father that's alive for me. My father wasn't in on this ambush. It's big. Tarof, teraf. Again, that double language. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. And we'll get up to the whole confrontation, but I want to just say something, which is it's really interesting. I remember thinking to myself, okay, if we're about to see the interfacing of these twin Moshiachs, there's got to be some hints in the Torah. There's got to be some hints that show us that it's a really big deal. And you want to know what the first thing I came across that it says, which is really fascinating. It says that when the brothers came down there for the first time, and they started to have this back and forth, and he brings the brothers in, and he seats them in age order, and he starts talking about their welfare and about their family and all these different things. It says, "Nachosh yinachesh." I'm a man of divining power. I'm able to use my gavia, my kos, to divine and to be tapped in to understanding what we're talking about. Yosef conversation, nachesh v'yinachesh, the double language of Mashiach, where even the word nachash is the gematria of Mashiach. So Yosef literally says to Yehuda and the brothers, we are about to have a Mashiach conversation. This whole thing is messianic. This whole thing, nachesh yinachesh. When Yosef reveals himself to his brothers, the Jewish people, you know what he does in Vayigash? He explains, he says like this. He says, don't go ahead and don't be angry at each other. Don't fight, okay? It's not you. It was Hashem. I want to tell you what he says beferish. He says, Vayishalcheni Elohim lifnechem. Hashem sent me down ahead of you. Lasum lachem she'erit ba'aretz u'lachayot lachem lifleta gedola. Okay? Hashem sent me down in Pasuk, hey, Vata al te'atzvu. Don't be sad. Va'al yichar be'enechem. Don't be mad at each other. Ki machartem oti hena. Because you've sold me. Why? Ki lemechiyah shelachani Elohim lefnechem. Because to be a sustainer, a mechayeh, Hashem sent me down. And if you look at the word lemechayeh, just like the word hachalom asher chalamta, where the last part of asher chalamta spells Rachel meta, we look at the word ki lemechayeh. You know what it says? Ki lemechayeh shelachani. If we take that first letter shin from shelachani, which neighbors the word lemechayeh, it's ki liot Mashiach. HaMashiach. Because you sent me down to be the Mashiach. It's okay. It's not you. It's Hashem. So cool about Yosef is that the entire time that he's translating the dreams of Paro, he says the name of Elohim 7 times. In other words, he's totally cognizant of the fact that it's not him. He's just channeling Hashem's energy, and he's able to have this koach of being able to not only interpret the dreams, which is cool, but he's able to give real solutions for what's about to come next. And I think that part is amazing. That part is really incredible, to be the Mechayeh, okay? And again, this is stuff where it's hidden in plain sight. You know, they're about to have this Mashiach conversation, and of course, sure enough, Kinachesh, kinachesh. How would you think I wouldn't know what was going on? I have divine inspirational powers. Why? Crazy. He uses the double Mashiach language of literally spelling out Mashiach. Nachash is the same gematria when he's speaking to Yehuda. And it takes time for him to get it, and they interface and they talk about it, and ultimately, you know, it ends off where he says, look, say to my father, come down to me and don't delay. That's what Yosef says to Yehuda. And this is really the message right now. Please say to my father up in Shemayim, come down to me right now and don't delay. In other words, bring me back to the Garden of Eden so that Hashem can come back to me and I can actually be retransformed back into the higher dimensional reality. It's big. All this stuff is just hidden mamash in plain sight. Something which is really interesting in this story too is that what Yosef does is Yosef uses his goblet, his chalice, as hagavia. And you know what he does with it? He puts it in Binyamin's sack. This is what leads us up to parshat Vayigash, right? We're now at this precipice where he had Ephraim or Menashe put the gavia in Binyamin's sack and then go over, take the brothers as they're returning back with Shever. And all of a sudden it's revealed that it's in Binyamin's sack, and oh my gosh, what an embarrassment after everything, right? This word hagavia is so interesting. We don't have this word almost anywhere else in the Torah, hagavia. The cup, hagavia, first of all, is the same gematria as melech, king. Fascinating. Hagavia is the same gematria as melech, because it was a kingly message that was being communicated to Binyamin. And what's fascinating about this also is that we know that there's been a couple times where the regal majesty of kingship has not been in the hands of Yosef or Yehuda, where it's been in the hands of Binyamin. For example, Shaul HaMelech, who was the first king. Shaul was from Shevet Binyamin. Or if we look at Mordechai HaYehudi, but Mordechai ben Kish Ish Yemini, he was from Binyamin also. So this gavia that's being put in his sack, this melechness, this kingship is being legitimately put into Binyamin's genetic code, and that's how we have kingly kings that show up from Shevet Binyamin is the same gavia. Also, hagavia, interesting enough, is the same gematria as Adam, a double lashon of Adam, the original Mashiach. And again, a double lashon means or hints to the twin Moshiachs. Adam is when the lower Adam and the higher Adam are perfectly interfaced. We see this when Hashem says, Avraham, Avraham, by the Akedah Yitzchak. In other words, we learn the famous idea that it's a double Lashon from a place of Lashon Chiba, Lashon Ahava. Wow, I love Avram so much. It is. That's beautiful. So Hashem says his name twice, but also, on a real level, the Adam in this lower dimensional reality mirrors perfectly the Avraham that's in the higher dimensional reality. And Hagavia is also hidden in plain sight, this majestic code of Melech, this majestic code of Adam, the twin Moshiachs of the original Adam creation. Whole lot of hunking happening over here, apparently. And this is all hidden in plain sight. And it's absolutely amazing to hear, of course, what Yehuda has to say about it. And Yehuda telling the story and how Hashem, really wants, for example, that it's very important that the Na'ar goes back up with him. And we can get into the specifics in the Lashon of what Yehuda and Yosef actually interface and what they actually are communicating in code. It's deep. I don't really have too much right now that I want to go into about that. I just wanted to give everyone the idea that we're about to see two Moshiachs interfacing. We're about to see it. The gematrias show it. The Lashon shows it. And there's a lot of stuff and a lot of emotions at play, both in the characters that are alive at that moment, as well as the mahut of the neshamot that will be around for generations and generations and generations. I find it so fascinating when you look at Yosef. One of the things that he was really good at is when he was in Potiphar's house, it says that Potiphar realized that he was blessed. And because he realized he was blessed, it said that he let Yosef be in charge of all the things in his household, that he passed everything in his household through Yosef. In other words, Yosef would come over here and touch it, and then would put it back. It was like this transforming divine power of bracha that would allow these things to be uplifted. And Potiphar passed everything in his house through Yosef. Except, of course, his wife, right? Because that wasn't what it was to be a tzaddik. And very similar in the prison. In the prison, Yosef also, he rises to the top. And then in Egypt, it's very similar also, because he stores and he gathers and he saves up all of the provisions and everything needed to take the world through a time when it was going to be really hard, when there was going to be a famine that was going to be so bad that you wouldn't even remember the 7 good years, if you remember that. And what's awesome is that it culminates in him giving seeds out to the entire world. If someone's giving seeds out to the whole world and telling them to go plant, and they're a Mashiach, what do you get a sense, and they're Mashiach ben Yosef, what do you get a sense that Yosef wants them to plant and plant and plant? Because he wants them to be planting the Garden of Eden. He wants to turn this world into the Garden of Eden. And it's a really profound idea. Often when people ask, well, where's Olam Haba? So Rav Mendel Kessler explains it really beautiful. He says, Olam Haba is right here. We're in Olam Haba. This is it. Look around you. This is Olam Haba. Well, that's weird because it doesn't look like it. It looks pretty dismal. Is Olam Haba? The answer is yes. This is what Olam Haba looks like. It's just that we don't have the frequency. We don't have the technology. We don't have the right secretion in our brain to put on us the newly lenses of virtual reality that Hashem can put on us when we ascend to see that we're in Olam Haba right here, right now. And that's a really deep level because Yosef saves up everything and then blesses the world by giving them all seeds to go replant. So what are they going to go replant? They're going to replant the Garden of Eden. And once they replant the Garden of Eden, that's all that Yosef is about. That's what he's here to do. He's helped to bring us back to the Garden of Eden. And once he does that, then Yehuda comes along, and Mashiach ben David comes along to then transform us back to the oneness of Hashem. Nowadays, the more that we listen to the news and we understand about what's going on, we understand that we're being assaulted everywhere. The media lies to us. It always lies to us. It's a tool for propaganda. Only the Torah is truth. We look at nature. We look at what's happening. We look at sickness and viruses and illness. We look at the collapse of beehives, bees. animals going extinct. And it's really interesting because we look at this and we understand that it's the exact opposite of planting the Garden of Eden. The forces of darkness, the Nachash, they want to destroy the Garden of Eden. They want to spray glyphosates and Monsanto and poisons and synthetics and chemicals. They want us to not realize that when we look at our fellow brother, when we hug our fellow brother, that in that moment, that hug, that double hug is it represents this messianic energy, a possibility. They don't want us to know about that. They want us to be lost in media, in social media, in the metaverse. A lot of people think that Yosef was someone who, was a dreamer. Yosef was a dreamer. That's true. But he was also an interpreter of dreams. But even better than him being a dreamer and an interpreter of dreams was the fact that he gave real solutions. And I hope that in the next talk, I hope to give some real solutions, just like Yosef did with the famine and with saving the world. I hope to give some real solutions, God willing, in the next talk that I give regarding what we can do to really turn this world into the Garden of Eden. From the side of the Sitra Achra, they are already convincing people that boys are not boys, girls are not girls. There's no more mothers. Now they're just birthing persons. They're convincing people that they don't matter, that they're part of a metaverse. They can just load themselves up to the technological cloud and just be some digital, soulless, analog version of themselves. They're trying to delete nature. They're trying to eliminate it. They're trying to remove all these different aspects. They're trying to keep people sick and to keep people unwell and to give people endless, constant pharmaceutical interventions, which have nothing to do with the divine chachma that Hashem put in the world of nature, in the world of herbology, in the world of herbal medicines, in the world of orthomolecular medicine, looking and understanding what vitamins and nutrients and supplements and things we can tap into from the Garden of Eden, mamash, right? It's really unbelievable. And Be'ezrat Hashem, we're getting more and more. Even if you look at this, what is the first mitzvah in the Torah? The first mitzvah is Pru U'Revu. Again, a double lashon, right? A double lashon of the messianic understandings. Pru U'Revu, go be fruitful and multiply, and go just go out there and multiply, and be many down here. And then, of course, unfortunately, that world is destroyed, and then we have the next world of Noach and his children. And Noach comes out of the teva with his family, with his wife Naamah, with Shem, Cham, Yafet, with their wives and their kids, and Hashem gives him the same exact mitzvah. Pru U'Revu, go out there and go be fruitful, go multiply. And what does the Sitra Achra go out there and tell the world? It's not sustainable to have a big family. You need to not have a big family. Population control, and all sorts of really population control from that perspective, and population control from controlling the population. Very similar to China. It was really they've been doing something very similar for many generations, telling people you can only have one child. Of course, therefore, what that means, unfortunately, very often in the past 30, 50, 100 years is that if that child was a girl that's less desirable, they would just get rid of her so that they can just have a boy. It's unbelievable. Our world, there's so much shefa here. There's so much shefa here. We're meant to live in the Garden of Eden. Yosef, go plant those seeds. Let's get back to nature. Let's go plant those seeds. Let's be fruitful and multiply. Let's go ahead and let's do it. Let's relive this Yosef energy of bringing shefa into the world, of transforming this world back into the Garden of Eden. This world is meant to be a Garden of Eden. We're meant to be in Olam Haba now, and that process is real. If we could just get rid of the poisons and get rid of the synthetics and get rid of the chemicals and get rid of anything that's causing us Chalila harm, really harm, just from a place of emet or not, it's causing harm, then we can get back to really giving out those seeds again and growing the Garden of Eden. And Be'ezrat Hashem, bless us that we can look more into the interfacing of Yosef and Yehuda. I'm happy in a future talk to actually really get into their specific conversation, but I just wanted to set the stage for these two persona of personas coming together and really hammering this out and the illusion of, my father being Hashem, and these two brothers, each one representing different aspects of the transformation process for the Jewish people as we transform back to the oneness of Hashem. Be blessed. Have a Shabbat Shalom Mevorach. And I hope that when you come to this week's parsha Vayigash, as well as the next bunch of parshot regarding Moshe and Aaron and the redemption from Egypt, and very soon the redemption from our world right now to the Geula, that you see it with new eyes, with a fresh perspective. It's always fun. I'm 42 years old. I grew up in the yeshiva system, and for me, man, I just absolutely love coming across Torahs that are fresh, that I haven't heard before. And I hope that this finds you exactly like that too, as fresh, as new, as innovative. Have a Shabbat Shalom, and thank you so much for your time. God bless.